Good afternoon, everybody. A very warm thank you to School Reformer for providing me with this wonderful platform and this wonderful opportunity. Uh, Today, I shall try to walk you through the arc of um, the different strategies of differentiated instruction. I shall start my presentation by showing you two pictures, and I would ask you to look at the two pictures very carefully and try to evaluate or try to judge how the two scenarios are different. In the first picture, it is very evident that we have provided the same resources to three different individuals who actually have three very different requirements. Whereas in a sharp contrast, in the second picture, what we see is that we have varied the resources slightly, and the resources have been provided to the individuals, keeping in mind their requirement, keeping in mind their needs. This, I would say, is a classic example of the difference between equality and equity. In the first picture, where of course the same resources have been provided to the three individuals, of course we have ensured equality because it's the same facility or the same resource that has been provided to all the individuals or all the stakeholders involved. However, in the second picture, we see that we have tried to provide the resources keeping in mind the requirements or the needs of the stakeholders involved. Now, if we think of this scenario in the context of education, or even simply put, if we think of this scenario in the context of our classrooms, I think all of you would agree that the second scenario, where we are trying to ensure equity, is way more fair than the first scenario, where we are trying to ensure equality. Because in this scenario, basically, what is the outcome that we desire? We want all the individuals to be able to watch the game or the match that is going on the other side of the fence. And that we can think of as the learning outcome, which we set in our classrooms. And at the end of the day, I think every educator wants that each and every learner in the class should be able to reach those learning outcomes. So that actually brings us to the importance of differentiated instruction. So when we talk about differentiated instruction, basically what we are trying to do is we are trying to alter our techniques, alter the processes of teaching so as to tailor the lessons or customize the lessons according to the needs and requirements of the individuals. Here, individuals, of course, by individuals, we're referring to the students or the learners who are there in our classroom. Because we know that in, say, a classroom or in a group of 30 learners, of course, they would all have different levels of understanding. They would have different levels of readiness. They would be having different capabilities. And while carrying out a transaction of lesson, when we are trying to teach a lesson or teach a particular concept in class, we have to keep this in mind, that the way each and every learner is making sense of what we are talking about is very, very different. So it's not actually just enough to, walk into a classroom and just whatever concepts I have to teach, I'll just talk about it and walk out. Because it is very important to ensure that whatever I'm talking about has reached my learners. And in order to ensure that, it is imperative that each and every educator actually takes up or actually adopts these different processes of differentiated instruction. Now, when I talk about differentiated instruction, of course, there can be various aspects of differentiating our instructions. So, broadly speaking, teachers can differentiate content, they can differentiate process, they can differentiate product, or very, very importantly, they can differentiate the learning environment. Now, today we shall start with content differentiation. Now, as I think it's the name itself says it very clearly, that content differentiation basically involves teaching a particular concept to the learners, but then in the process of teaching, even though it is the same content that each and every learner is learning, the resources that we provide them with have to be varied. So we can now, how to carry out this variation? Now, we are actually trying to provide our students with different choices, which are based on their needs or requirements. So for that, we might have to vary the resources that we are providing with, or take up other strategies of differentiation with the help of which the same concept can reach all the learners, but in a way which they can comprehend. So that is basically what we mean when we talk about content differentiation. Now, some very effective strategies of content differentiation could be, of course, as I said, the first thing that comes to our mind, providing a variety of resources, providing a variety of learning materials. Now, something that we have to remember is that when we talk about differentiation, we are not really only talking about the less capable members of the cohort of learners. We are also trying to cater to the needs of the more gifted children which we have in our classrooms, because very often what happens is that in the process of paying more attention to the less capable students, we try to, or not try, but rather we end up ignoring the needs of the more gifted children. So when we are trying to adopt differentiation strategies, this is something that all of us must keep in mind. So this could be a very, very effective strategy of differentiation, wherein maybe I'm teaching, say, the same concept, maybe I'm teaching a particular concept in light in class, but then once I have completed whatever has to be covered in the so-called syllabus, keeping in mind the needs of the more gifted students, I can always refer to them some book, or maybe some kind of resource that you can check this out. You can see, you will find that there is some additional information which is there, so that satiates their need and their urge to know more. Second is varying presentation styles. Now, of course, we know that different children learn differently. So the same method might not be effective for each and every one of them. So once again, if we think that no, as a teacher, every day I'll walk into the class and I'll give a 30 minutes lecture and I'll just walk out, it's not going to work. And differentiation, we have to remember, is something that is very, very dynamic. Even when we are adopting differentiation strategies, we should not think that there is a well set template, that the same method of differentiation is going to work every time. So that is again something that we have to keep varying. So maybe the traditional lecturing system works for certain students, but then maybe again there may be some students for whom, if you provide the content in the form of some audio visual aids, maybe you're showing them a simulation, or you're showing them the video of an experiment, or maybe you are showing them a working model or a static model, all of these could be effective strategies of varying your presentation style. And very, very important is scaffolding. I think that is one of the most effective strategies that works, I think, almost all the time, because as educators, when we do scaffolding, I think it becomes easier for us to cater to a large number of learners at the same time. And so it's not that we are ignoring any member of the class. And this, I feel, is a very effective strategy when it comes to adopting strategies of differentiation. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is process differentiation. Now, sometimes we often confuse content differentiation with process differentiation, but of course, there is a big difference between the two, because when we are talking about process differentiation, basically what we are trying to do is we are trying to vary the different activities that our learners are using in order to learn the concepts that we are trying to teach. So some of the very effective strategies of process differentiation could be, firstly, adopting tired activities. Now, again, this is, I feel, a very, very helpful method of bringing about process differentiation. Now, tiring, of course, is something that we can do for both content as well as process differentiation. But when we are tiring content, actually what we are doing is that all the students are actually doing the same activity. Maybe all of them, I have given each and every member of the class a worksheet, but the worksheets that I have given them could be of varying difficulties. However, when I'm tiring process, actually the activities themselves are different. So that is actually the basic difference between tiring content and tiring process. Another very effective strategy of process differentiation is using graphic organizers. Now, there are many, many examples and many, many types of graphic organizers that we can use. We can use Venn diagrams. We can show mind maps, because mind maps, I think, is something that really works for a lot of learners. We can use flow charts. We can use KWL charts. KWL charts, of course, are something that the student herself is going to maintain. So maybe at the beginning of a lesson, we can tell them that you prepare a chart which will have 3 columns where you will write down that what you already know, what you want to know, and what you have learned. So this actually gives the learner a feeling that whether the learning outcome has been achieved or not. So it's not really dependent on how much marks I have scored in an assessment or anything of that sort. So the learner himself will know that, okay, this is what I wanted to achieve and this is what I have achieved. So that again could be a great way of going about it. And finally, learning centers and interest centers. Again, this is something which I feel works a lot for the more gifted learners. Say, for example, we can have a small book corner in the classroom itself. So it's not necessary that each and every student actually has to read all the books which are there. But what I am doing is I am giving them the option of reading those books. So maybe if somebody has already grasped a particular concept or has understood what has been done in the class already, but wants to know more, so I can always provide that person with the option of having more resources, or maybe reading through more books, or it could be anything. Even say for science subjects in the laboratories also, maybe we can set up such interest corners where maybe we can keep some small models or small experimental models. It's not necessary that that experiment has to be a part of the curriculum, because remember, that is exactly what we are talking about over here, that maybe a particular child wants to go beyond the curriculum. So how do we help that child? So this again could be a very effective way of doing it. Next, we come to product differentiation, which is put very simply, it basically means adopting different tools of assessment. So I think we are already working on that a lot. We are all trying to move beyond the traditional pen and paper assessments, and we are all trying to, adopt different methods of formative assessment. It could be in various forms. It could be in the form of, say, a role play, or a skate, or some project, or some presentation, or a report. So there could be a wide range of assessment tools that we could be using. So because when we restrict ourselves to the methods of traditional assessments, again, it could be that a particular learner has understood the concept, but might not be very proficient in putting down in words what we are trying to find out, or maybe a particular question. When that has to be answered, if you ask, we often see this, right? That there are some learners who we know have understood the concept, but then when they have to put it on paper, when they have to write an answer, they're not sometimes very good at it. But at the end of the day, what we all want to find out as educators is that whatever learning outcomes I had in the beginning, if they have been met or not. So ultimately, what we want to do is to check if the learner has understood the concept. So there is no hard and fast rule that he or she always has to write the answers. There could be so many other ways of uh, demonstrating that, yes, I have understood. And that could be various assessment tools, in the form of various assessment tools, rather, even say, for example, presentations, or sometimes, the art-based projects, or art integrated learning, which even CBSE is trying to promote a lot. So all these different tools can be used in order to check how much the child has understood. Now I come to something very, very important, that is differentiation of the learning environment. Now, typically, when we think about uh, differentiation strategies, we talk about all these different things that I have been mentioning so far: varying the resources, varying the assessment tools, varying the teaching styles. But something which is equally important is the environment in which the child learns, because not every child learns equally well in a similar kind of an environment. So maybe somebody needs a little more working space. Maybe somebody works well when sitting in a corner. Maybe somebody works very well when sitting in a group. So in fact, this is something that is corroborated by the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which tells us that if we think of the pyramid of needs of an individual, then only when the basic needs and the psychological needs of the individual are met can it lead to the self-fulfillment needs. So in the context of education, it is very, very important that the physiological factors are taken care of. So if, say, for example, if a child is sitting next to the window and it's a very hot and sunny day, and the child is feeling uncomfortable, so it is obvious that the child will not be able to give undivided attention to what is being taught in class. He will definitely think of, oh, I'm feeling so hot, oh, there is too much of light coming in. So I'm not saying that we have to keep on altering our classrooms or something like that, but yes, we definitely have to put an effort to ensure that we can make our learners as comfortable as possible. So, of course, I'm not saying that I have to give every learner five-star facilities. That's not what I'm talking about. But at least we have to make the learner feel safe and comfortable, feel cared for. That is very important, because only when they feel cared for, they think that, okay, I can trust the teacher. I can now, okay, I can listen to what this person is trying to tell me. So that is something very, very important when which we need to keep in mind when we are trying to adopt differentiation strategies. So of course, whatever I have said so far, these are all different, just a handful of different strategies. There could be many more strategies of differentiation that we can adopt. And as I said right in the beginning, that differentiation is a very, very dynamic process. It's not that there is a fixed template which I can follow year after year for each and every class. It has to be altered. We have to continuously judge the group of students that we are dealing with. It could also be that maybe this particular academic session, the kind of differentiation strategies that I have used for a particular class, maybe a 9th standard class, could have to be very, very different from what I have to do next year, because after all, I'm again dealing with a different group of learners. So in general, I know that of course as teachers we all have so many different things to take care of. So how do we actually go about? First and foremost, we have to uh, allow ourselves the liberty of starting with a class which is easy to work with. We all know that there are always some of those difficult classes and some of those easier classes. So to begin with, maybe it's better to start with a class of students or a group of students who are easier to work with. Then once we have identified the class, what is very essential for us to understand is that what kind of differentiation is actually needed, which means that I have to have a very clear idea about the learners that I am dealing with. Because until and unless I know their strengths and weaknesses, it is impossible for me to decide upon what kind of differentiation strategies I'm going to take up. So maybe we can take a small test, maybe which tests their prior knowledge, or maybe after I have taught one chapter in the class, I could take a short assessment and try to assess and analyze what kind of differentiation the children actually need, or which are the learners who actually need some techniques to be tweaked or altered. The next step is selecting the element that I want to differentiate. Of course, it's not possible for any teacher to differentiate content, process, product, everything in one go. That's not possible. So to begin with, we first have to identify that, okay, this is the element that I'm going to differentiate. Plus, in any case, it has to happen at different stages of the teaching, right? So in any case, I shall have to, in most cases, start differentiating the content, and only then I can maybe move on to differentiating, say, the process or the product. Of course, differentiating the learning environment is something that we, I think, should do all the time. But other than that, whether it comes to differentiation of content or process or product, it has to be taken one at a time. Next step is to start with one subject area. Again, that's similar to what I was saying in the previous case also, that we cannot be differentiating everything together. And finally, the implementation of the differentiated activity. So it should not be that when I'm teaching one unit or say one chapter or one particular lesson, everywhere I'm differentiating. No, that's not needed, because there are certain things which children will learn together. But then there could be certain areas where the differentiation is essential. So as a teacher, it is very important that we understand that, yes, this is probably the area where differentiation is needed. Say, for example, I'm teaching reflection of light. So to begin with, whatever concepts have to be taught, have to be taught. But maybe when I have proceeded a little bit further, when maybe I'm dealing with image formations, there maybe I could start thinking of the different techniques that I may have to adopt in order to cater to the needs of the different learners. So I would finish my presentation with that. I hope this has been helpful, and I think this is one quote that I came across somewhere, and I think this is something very, very true. And if, as educators, keep we all remember this, we all keep this in mind, that yes, every student is actually capable of learning. It's just that they learn at their own pace and they learn in their own way. I think it would help not only the learners, but it would also help us educators, because at the end of the day, I think nothing makes a teacher happier than to realize that, okay, whatever learning outcomes I wanted to achieve, my learners have achieved. So I think that's a very, very gratifying feeling. So with that, I would end my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Srirupa. Can you stop sharing your screen, ma'am, so that
Sure.
audience can have a better view of you? Thank you. So, lovely sharing, ma'am. And we have a couple of questions lined up here. I would like to read out those. Most of the points, just a second. Most of the points are already covered by you, but the questions are repetitive. If you want, you can skip those. Okay. Um, answer them in brief because there are around 19 questions
Okay.
posted. Yeah.
Okay.
So the first question is, can you share examples of successful implementation of differentiated instruction in various educational settings?
Yes, I think I will just, since it's you've anyway asked for an example, basically in, say, for example, the Cambridge curriculum, I'm talking about the 9th and 10th levels in the IGCSE curriculum. They actually have an option wherein a learner can either go for a core course, or they can go for an extended course. So that now, the basic concepts which are included in the syllabus are not different. So, say for example, a student who wants to opt for the core curriculum and a student who wants to opt for the extended curriculum, both will learn the same concepts. I will talk in terms of physics, since I'm a teacher of physics. So, say for example, energy, they are all learning about what is energy, how energy and work are related, what are the different forms of energy, how can energy be transformed from one form to another, so on and so forth. So the basic framework is the same. However, those students who are taking up the core course actually learn the entire concept a little more qualitatively, whereas the students who opt for the extended curriculum go a little farther ahead, and they also try to solve numerical problems. They try to apply what they have learned. So this actually is something that is there for all the concepts and for all subjects also. I think for not just for physics, but coordinated sciences or mathematics, they all do it this way. So this, I think, is a very, very good and a very, very interesting way of implementing a curriculum, because to a large extent possible, we are actually tailoring our instruction according to the capabilities of the learners. Even I think back home in the CBSE papers also, for mathematics, we have a basic and a standard paper, which essentially is a form of differentiation, because again, they are all learning the same concepts, but at the end of the day, the paper which a student who's attempting the basic mathematics is different in terms of the difficulty level as compared to the paper which a student who's attempting the standard mathematics paper is writing.
Thank you, ma'am. So you have addressed the diverse learning needs also. So I would like to skip that question and move to the next one. What role does technology play in supporting or enhancing differentiated instruction?
Okay, that's a very good question, actually. I think technology has an immense role to play when it comes to differentiated instruction. In fact, during my presentation, I was talking about varying the different presentation styles. And I think that is where technology can be most helpful. When we are talking about presentation styles, say, for example, I was talking about the different graphic means. So, say, for example, even simple PPTs, we can show them flow charts, we can show them tree diagrams, we can another very, very important aspect is use of simulations, because it's not always possible that each and everything, again, I'm speaking from the point of view of teaching science, it's not, particularly at the school level, it's not always possible that each and everything that you teach you can actually do an experiment to show them. You can do a physical experiment. It might not be possible all the time, but then simulations can be very, very helpful in such cases. Say, for example, when we are teaching AC generators or DC motors, it could be a little difficult for school children to grasp. But then when we show them simulations, it becomes really easy. I mean, this is something that I'm saying from personal experience. I have seen that, when initially the topic is introduced, most of them actually struggle a lot. But when you actually show them a simulation and how the whole thing works, it becomes really easy. Now, of course, we have a lot of interactive simulations also. A lot of them are available. So that could also be a very, very good way of engaging the entire class. So just to give you a simple example, suppose we are teaching about density, and maybe the simulation gives you the option of choosing different articles and putting them on a scale pan and find out the weight, calculate the mass from that, find out the volume. So maybe we can call up the learners one by one, and okay, you select this. So even if it's a very simple task, like maybe clicking on an object and selecting it, it gratifies the child. The learner feels that, okay, I'm also very much part of it. And this is something that we can do with each and every learner, irrespective of their capabilities. So this definitely, technology has a very, very important role to play.
So, ma'am, are there any challenges or common misconceptions associated with implementing differentiated instruction, and how can they be overcome?
I think, again, this is something that I was very briefly talking about during my presentation. I think normally when we talk about differentiated instruction, most of us concentrate on catering to the needs of the comparatively less capable students of the class, and in the process the more gifted learners actually get ignored. I think that is something that we really need to do away with, because we have to understand that the more gifted children, they are actually craving for something more. So it's not just enough for them to know whatever is there in the textbook or in the curriculum. They really want to go beyond. So if we keep ignoring their needs, then ultimately they lose interest, because it is very important that we engage them as well. This, I think, is the greatest misconception that most of us have about differentiation. As I said, it's not always possible for a teacher to do certain things or do certain activities only to fulfill the requirements of those children. But yes, maybe beyond class we can have a word with them. You can read that book, or try to do this at home, and you can get back to me. Tell me what your observations were, or you can just check this out and you can share with your friends what you have observed. So that actually gives them a lot of motivation. So yeah, that I think is something that should be kept in mind whenever we are trying to do any kind of differentiation in class.
Thank you. So, ma'am, coming to the students with special needs, can you share any personal experience that impact, can you highlight that?
I think when we are talking about children with special needs, of course, that kind of also depends upon the extent to which the child has to be helped. So maybe in some cases we would require educators who are special education. I mean, who are trained to deal with children who have special needs. But other than that, in general, of course, in our regular classrooms, we do come across children who we know have certain learning issues. So there, I think it's a little bit of time beyond our classes on a one-to-one basis helps a lot. And something else which is very, very important for these children, I feel, is to boost their confidence. Because very often what we find is that some children, they just start believing that no, I can't do it, or I won't be able to do it. So it's very important that we keep boosting their confidence. I mean, of course, apart from the fact that we have to uh, do whatever needs to be done in order that they get the concepts or they get whatever we are teaching, in addition to that, this is also something very, very important. Sometimes, even if they have done something small and simple, just telling them that, oh, you have done a great job in front of the entire class, so that they feel validated. I think that's a very, very important aspect of dealing with these children.
So how can teachers collaborate with colleagues to share successful differentiated instruction practices?
This is very important. I think that we have to keep sharing our practices, or whatever experiences that we are having in class. And I'm sorry to say that mostly, when something has worked in our favor, that is what we share. Oh, I did this in this class and it worked very well. Of course, that is also very important. I'm not saying that that is not important. But in addition to that, it is also important that we share our failures. That is, I tried to do this in this particular class because I wanted to differentiate my content, or I wanted to differentiate my product, but it did not work. So not only that creates a kind of group feeling among our colleagues, that okay, it's not just me, the other person has also tried and maybe it has not worked. Of course, that is there, but more importantly, we can also learn from each other. That okay, are you talking about that child in that particular class? You can try this out, it will work. So in fact, this is something that I have myself experienced. We had a very difficult child, that too in a board year. And all the teachers actually who were teaching that child, I mean, whatever subjects that child had taken up, we were all struggling with him. But then we collaborated amongst each other a lot. Of course, different subjects have different requirements, but then there are certain things. I mean, I think there is always a common thread. So it's very, very important that we share our teaching practices with each other and we collaborate with each other. That's really important.
So, sharing the knowledge, of course, it helps, ma'am.
Yeah.
Do you recommend any specific professional development opportunities for educators looking to enhance their skills in this instruction?
I
Workshops
think
or anything like that, courses, certification, anything like that?
okay, honestly speaking, there aren't any really courses or workshops that I am aware of. There may be. But then, if you ask me, I would say that in this regard, experience is probably the best teacher. So it's not just the experience that I acquire as an educator. Of course, that is very, very important. It's also the experiences that I can gather from others, which again takes us back to the question that you had asked before this. So, but yeah, professionally, if you are asking of any particular course that can help us implement differentiation strategies, I'm not aware of any such courses which exclusively concentrate on differentiation strategies.
Thank you, ma'am. Last but not the least, how do you balance the need for differentiation with the demands of standardized testing and assessments?
Yes, that's actually, I think, a very good question. I think what we can do is that, see, at the end of every term, we all have to make sure that the child is ready for the summative assessments, whether it's the annual exam in school or it's a board examination or in whatever form it might be. But what we can do is we can try to tweak and alter the formative assessments that we take. We all, as teachers, throughout the term, we are taking so many different formative assessments, right? Which in any case is something very, very important and very, very relevant. Plus, even say for the board exams and all, also, we have to give some marks for the internal assessment. So, internal assessment is a very important part of the teaching that we are doing. So formative assessments, of course, is something that we can actually we can make formative assessments very, very innovative. And I think that is something that must be done, because with so many formative assessments that a learner writes throughout the term, I think just leave everything else. It gets very boring for the child to write a pen and paper test continuously. So we can actually use the different assessment methods, like as I was mentioning in my presentation. Peer teaching is again a very, very good way of doing it. Skits, role plays, presentations, oral presentations, then making project reports, or say making a short video of some experiment, small activity that they might have done. So yes, definitely the formatives is something that we can do. Of course, at the end of the term or at the end of the year, the traditional summative assessments that we have, that of course will be there, and that's something that we cannot help, and we have to make sure that our learners are ready for them. But through the term, of course, we can use a whole lot of different assessment tools in the form of formatives.
Thank you, ma'am. School Journal of Education and schoolreformer.com. Thank you for the talk and for patiently answering all the questions. Some questions were repetitive, but you were elaborate.
It
We
was my
also
pleasure.
thank the audience for participating in the event. Do you want to mention anything else, ma'am?
I would actually like to end with what I had started with, that I'm very, very happy and very, very humbled to be part of this initiative. I think it's a great initiative. In fact, just a while back when I was talking about collaborating and sharing teaching practices, I think that is exactly what you people are doing, and or rather providing a platform for doing. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, ma'am. I'll end the session now.
Sure. Thank you so much.